The author of a terrific, I should say that it means that the other ones aren't equally as terrific. They're all great. They're all must-read. Football Morning in America Monday column from NBC Sports. Peter King back here on the show. How are you, Peter?
I'm doing well, Rich. How about you?
I'm doing great, and I really thought that was a great deep dive. I don't want to get too much into it because I definitely want some fans to go check out your column where you went inside the lair, I guess, of Sean Payton and the Saints as they were preparing for the Eagles. What did you learn from that experience, Peter?
That no idea is a bad idea. It reminded me a lot of Doug Peterson last year when I was able to go inside some stuff with him and Frank Reich and some of their offensive coaches, both before and after the Super Bowl. Here's the thing you learn about football today, that if you don't study everybody in the game, if you don't look at what everybody else is doing, you're going to be left in the dust. You can't just say, like when I covered the Giants in the 80s, Bill Parcells had 4 or 5 running plays, and he just kept running them during games, game after game after game, and he basically said, somebody stop us, then we'll do something different. But until they do, we're not going to do anything. So I'm standing there in a ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in New Orleans on Canal Street on Saturday night, and I'm watching the Saints offense go through a 15-play walkthrough. And I'm looking out there at one point, and there's Alvin Kamara in a red hoodie obscuring most of his face, and black flip-flops, and all the guys are out there, and you're looking out, and they're just in this hotel ballroom with the chairs pulled to the side so they can have a little room to walk through these final plays. And, Rich, they put a play in there, and Peyton calls out this formula, this long play call, and basically Taysom Hill, who's the backup quarterback, and Drew Brees, who's the quarterback, they line up in bunch formations, one to the left and one to the right. So I'm looking out there, and I'm saying, hold it a minute. There's 5 offensive linemen, there's 6 receivers, and there's no quarterback. There's no running back. It's not even like a wildcat play. There's nobody in the backfield, period. It's like somebody forgot. And I just said, this is the darndest thing I've ever seen in my life. And so Peyton then went through how he was sitting there Thursday night and thinking about things. Why can't we do this? And they added it to the game plan, on Saturday or on Friday, and then they ran it on Sunday. And that is sort of the kind of imagination. As Peyton says, and where'd this come from? And he goes, just doodling, just thinking. And so I have so much appreciation for sort of the John Nash element of some of these teams, including the Saints, and just the fact that, and I did it in this story I wrote, Rich, Drew Brees completed a Sean Payton sentence. It would have been ridiculous cliche if it actually didn't happen. But Peyton was saying something, and Brees completed his sentence for him, which I wrote about. And so that's the benefit of working together for 13 years. And this was one of the most enlightening things I've ever done. It was so interesting, and so I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and
I hope people read it.
It's incredible. Monday, Football Morning in America, the Monday column that you could check out from Peter King, and the fact that they're 41 points better than the defending Super Bowl champs, I don't think we would have seen that result had the Saints made it to the NFC Championship game, as it appeared they would towards the final throws of that game in Minnesota, because the Eagles are banged up, and also they have missing so many players from last year's Super Bowl. That said, This Saints team's better than the one from last year, though. Right, Peter?
Oh, yeah, I think so, because I think they are right now. They have peers on offense. The Chiefs and the Rams at their peak are their peers, but nobody's better than them on offense, and they are a pretty good defense. The years of drafting high and not missing, because Peyton and Mickey Loomis missed on a bunch of players in drafts a few years ago. They've had some very good drafts recently. And so to me, when I look at this, it's funny. Peyton was talking to me about this, and I think the only big personnel mistake that he thinks that they've made there is when they let Malcolm Jenkins go and they brought in Jarris Byrd in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, man, every time I watch Malcolm Jenkins play, he said, he's brilliant. You know, he's so smart. He gets everybody lined up the right way. He's got incredible instincts. He goes, and he's going to play forever. And he goes, that's the one that's kind of the big fish that got away. But he said otherwise, that I think one of the things about the Saints, Rich, is the fact that when you have four guys who nobody has ever heard of because of all the injuries they've had at the receiver group and tight end group, you have four guys who nobody's ever heard of catch 16 balls for 218 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, you know, it's really a great sort of way to look at the way the Saints operate, which is if somebody gets hurt, we're not too worried about it. We're going to bring in somebody who can, who can do it. And look, they were a little bit upset about Des Bryant. Obviously, he was going to be a good fit there, but Des Bryant doesn't work out. So they put Austin Carr in there, and they put somebody else in there, and they work. So it's going to be hard to beat the Saints, especially, and I'm not saying they will, but if they were to get home field, man, they're going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, I mean, Carr scored a touchdown. Traquan Smith scored 2. Daniel Jeremiah, who I'm, from the NFL Network, who's one of the best talent evaluators out there, and certainly, when we sit him next to Mayock on the draft set, it's great with him and Charles Davis. He tweeted out last night, "This Drew Brees tape versus the Eagles is one of the most impressive QB performances I've ever studied. There are 10 to 12 ridiculous throws." Is Brees any different? You saw him on Saturday night. I mean, he's a GOAT, but he seems to be GOAT plus this year.
Well,
Peter,
one of the things that we talked about is Pro Football Focus did a little bit of work for me on Brees, and they said the amount of throws he has been making, and this was before Sunday because it didn't really apply to Sunday, the amount of throws he is making to what they call wide open receivers who have at least 2 steps or more on the man who's in prime coverage on him, is the most in the league and far more than he had last year for whatever reason. Maybe they're designing plays better, who knows. But Brees made 2 or 3 throws yesterday that you say, how did that fit in there? And the amazing thing is the great day he had, his completion percentage went down. It's insane.
It is insane.
He was 5 points ahead of anybody who ever played the game through 10 weeks, 5 percentage points. And how about this stat, Rich? His lifetime completion percentage is 67.3, and his completion percentage this year is 77.
It's unbelievable.
It's just everything about him is insane. And I'll say this, just let me take you one little peek behind the curtain. The respect during this 40-minute meeting right at the end of Saturday night, ended about 10:40. The respect that flows from him to Peyton and back and forth. I counted like 46 plays that Brees, when he looked at the game plan, he goes, this is what I want to run. And Peyton did not disagree with a single one of them. And he put little Sharpie dots on his game plan sheet. And I don't know how many of those he actually ran, but Peyton walked out of there and he said to me, he goes, I'm in total agreement with him. That's what happens when you are one with the guy who plays quarterback and the guy who coaches. That's one of the strengths. It's why for years we've all said, hey, why have the Steelers had only 3 coaches in a half century? Because if you know you got the right guy and you're able to basically weather a couple of stormy years, say in the middle of it, like the Steelers did with Cowher, I think he had a 6-10 year, and then the next year he wins the Super Bowl. Because if you change coaches, then what happens is the whole organization basically has to start from ground zero, and you're behind. In the AFC East, 24 coaching changes since Bill Belichick took the Patriots job. So do you wonder why nobody in the AFC East can build up any sort of momentum to be able to beat the Patriots? That's a huge reason why.
Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show, and hearing you talk about how Brees is throwing to open receivers and how he and his coach are on the same page. I think you know where I'm going with this. Back in 2006, the Packers were looking at Peyton. We went with Mike McCarthy instead, and now here we are 12 years later, McCarthy and Rodgers, and it looks like there's a divorce coming. It's a passive-aggressive relationship. All that said, due to the Bears winning last night, the Packers are just one game behind the Vikings going into Sunday Night Football, and that's the final playoff spot. They have a chance to still make the playoffs. What is happening there, and what do you think does happen there, Peter King?
You know, you mentioned the word passive-aggressive. That's kind of how it looks to me, Rich. And again, Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy publicly are, they're fine. And so I don't think any of us can sit out here and swear that there's this massive problem. But, Rich, you just read between the lines, and you read basically, you read Aaron Rodgers, you see Aaron Rodgers, he's just, and look, he's not a stand-up comedian. He does make funny commercials, but he's not one of those guys who's Joe Glib and, who spouts a bunch of cliches. He's an earnest, very serious, incredibly smart person. But I just get the feeling right now that I'm looking at it, and like I wrote this week in my column, you just get the feeling that things are not right and they're going to make a change. That's the feeling that you get. And because they keep a very tight ship in Green Bay. And so other than Mike Silver's story, which I thought was brilliant, after the Ty Montgomery, gaffe against the Rams that basically cost them that game. The Rams keep things the Packers keep things pretty much in-house. But again, when you cover a team for a while or you cover the sport for a long time or sports in general, you can sort of tell when things are not hunky-dory. They just don't look hunky-dory there.
Yeah, and things change, obviously, in just 2 weeks' time. Look at the Dallas situation. The Chargers with a terrible home loss in the hands of the Broncos yesterday. A major crimp in their chance to get a bye week in the AFC, certainly with the Steelers doing what they're doing. The Le'Veon Bell final throws in Pittsburgh. What can you tell us about a last-ditch effort to get him there that we're hearing about, and whether he's going to get the contract he's looking for, Peter?
I've just heard what you heard, that the Steelers really wanted him to come in. They wanted, basically 7 weeks of insurance. Now, he almost certainly wouldn't have been active this week and maybe not even next week, or the next game. But I think, obviously, the Steelers thought his return to the team could have been managed. And I never put anything past Mike Tomlin. He just handles it. As for what his future is, Rich, we'll look back at this. Unless he is a more productive Frank Gore at age 34 and 35, which nobody's going to be, I just don't see much of a way he's ever going to make up $14.5 million. I don't quite understand why, especially when I do believe that there could have been a job share situation this year in Pittsburgh where he would not have gotten beaten up like he did. When I say beaten up, like maybe overused in his mind, which he was often in the pre-James Conner days. Conner last year was never healthy. This year he's showing that healthy. He's every bit as good in that offense as Le'Veon Bell has been. So I just think that if Le'Veon Bell sat down with management before the season and said, I want some sort of at least handshake deal that you're not going to, that I'm not going to touch it 400 times, that we're going to have a bit of a job share, I want to play and I'll play. And that's why this thing makes so little sense to me. And I don't know how anybody can look at it, Rich, and say, I'd pay Le'Veon Bell $17 million, or somebody will, like the Jets, let's say. And I think he'll be a good player, too. But, I would much rather spend very big money on a difference maker at another position. When the 67th pick in the draft in 2017 is the offensive rookie of the year, Alvin Kamara, And the 86th pick in 2017, Kareem Hunt, is the rushing champion. You sort of start to get the idea. Obviously, that's not the first time that lower pick running backs become huge stars. And that's why I tend to want to spend my $17 million elsewhere.
Last one for you, Peter. Outside of former cabinet members and Secretary of States, what's the most interesting name you've heard for a coach possibility next year, Peter?
Only, the guys. I think right now, Rich, it's really funny. A friend of mine who covers baseball told me that one team who was did a managerial search this year.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, this friend of mine, asked this general manager, "What are you looking for?" And he goes, "Sean McVay." And I think everybody in every sport right now is looking. If you have to pick a coach or a manager or something like that, they don't want. And with all due respect to Bruce Arians, they don't want Bruce Arians. They want Bruce Arians a generation ago. Who is that guy? Is it Lincoln Riley? Is it David Shaw? Could you possibly convince David Shaw to leave Stanford? Is it Jeff Brom, however you pronounce his name, at Purdue? I think people want to gamble on. You read my story today and you say, who's the next Sean Payton? That's the guy who I want. So you tell me who that is. Can you get Chris Peterson out of Seattle? Is he that guy? Those are the guys I think the NFL is going to be looking for when they have quite a few coaching changes this year.
Well, it looks like the Bears have found theirs. That's for darn sure.
Yes, he has. And, coming from the Andy Reid tree is not a bad way to go. I mean, look at what they have. 3 years ago, it's Doug Peterson. He wins the Super Bowl. Now it's Matt Nagy. And Nagy looks like he's the heavy favorite to win the NFC North now. So, I mean, it's just you want to go young, you want to go offense. That's the way right now the game plan looks in a coach-seeking business.
Enjoy the game tonight, Peter. Thanks for the time.
Thanks a million, Rich, and thanks a lot for the kind words on my column.
Absolutely. It's awesome. Thanks for joining. At Peter_King. Check it out.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.